Hello, Herman here with a new video in the ClearPass workshop series, where we build the ClearPass deployment from scratch and integrate with wired, wireless, Active Directory and much more. We have some open ends which I'd like to fix before we continue with other parts of the workshops. So one of it is the AD connection, our authentication source that's running LDAP, which is at this point unencrypted, as well our client certificates. We disabled the certificate check, which means that if we change the username at the client with a valid certificate, we can change our username and have different authorization, which is not a good thing. If we have a look in our authentication service, what we can see is that we have the ETLS authentication, but also here we have the strict username rules. You may remember that we did that. That is because in the authentication we have the email address, which is the username at the domain. That is what I configured for that. And by stripping it, we allowed to query the right user information from the Active Directory. Before we do any changes to the AD connection, I'd like to point you to this page, the ClearPass docs page on the website. The CPM hardening guide describes what you should do in production. So always good to have a look at that hardening guide before you put a ClearPass in production. So we like to change two things. First of all, we want to change the authentication method, and secondly, I'd like to change my authentication source, so that is using a service account and it's going over SSL. Let's first do the AD authentication source. If we check in our authentication source, you can see at this point the connection security is set to none. We'd like to change that now to AD over SSL. This automatically changes the port number, but we still need to tick the box verify server certificate, and this is where from the trust list we can select a certificate. Where's my certificate? There we are, and you can see this is the valid certificate for my CA, which also signed my AD server. Now we can check search base DN if we can still search it, so that works. Second thing is that we had the user account for the BindDN, which is not a good thing, because if the user leaves the company or if there is a password change, then suddenly your ClearPass may change. And I created a service account in AD, and that service account with the name svc_ClearPass, it has a setting that the password does not expire, and also the user cannot change the password. Let's change our BindDN to that svc_ClearPass and enter the corresponding password. And let's check again. That's good. We can still browse our Active Directory. So that's good with the SSL now and with the new service account. By the way, this is new in ClearPass 6.10 that you can select it here. For the older versions, you need to go into the trust list, and there you have the usage, which should be AD/LDAP server. So if you have an older version, 6.9 or before, make sure that the certificate usage for your AD root certificate, it's AD/LDAP servers. Otherwise, your connection will not work. But in ClearPass 6.10, it's enabled automatically. So the second part of our AD change is that we need to recognize our email address form of the username, because my certificates are issued based on the mail address, not on the UPN, not on the AD username. And I created a video on that, so check this video if you are not familiar with it and if you want to have all the details. But most important is that I can select this specific LDAP query, and I can use that in my authentication source. If I go back to my source into the attributes, you can see there we have the authentication, we can edit it, and there we have the default filter query. And the default filter query is just checking if the SAM account name, which is the Windows username, if that's the same as the username as sent by the user. And that's why we needed to have that username stripping, because we just needed to have the part before the @ so just admin1 or just user1. If we now check our copied LDAP query, our copied LDAP query it's either the SAM account name or the mail attribute in AD is the username. So now we can use either that admin1@arubalab.com or just the username. So let's take out the default one and make sure that we have that filter query just as a single line, no line breaks in between. So let's save that. And now let's have a look if our authentication is still successful. Let's do a COA on this session. And there we go. So now we know that the LDAP connection over SSL and our service account is working. We're still using the username stripping. So we are authenticating with the SAM account name admin1. And now we are changing our TLS authentication. So we go into the authentication methods, EAP-TLS, and we want to make a copy of that. So let's create that copy. Let's give it a nice name. So WS EAP-TLS, common name or SendCheck. And the SendCheck is needed because the email address is stored in the subject alternative name in the certificate. And finally here in the certificate comparison, so this is the check if the username sent is matching either the common name or the subject alternative name, which is the email address. As well, we can do online checking OCSP. So let's check that to optional. If there is no OCSP information available, the certificate will be just accepted. Let's save this one and let's go back to our service, because in our service in the authentication, now we need to change to our newly created authentication method. So the EAP-TLS common name or SAM, and we can disable the strip username rules because based on the mail address, it can now have the fully qualified email address as an authentication as well. Let's trigger another re-authentication and we can see it's still working. So still on EAP-TLS, and we still have everything we had collected before, but now without the username stripping and with a check on the username. So it's no longer possible to change your username and get the authorization for another different user. So that's it for now. Hope you like this video. If so, please press the like button as well. Subscribe to the channel, and if you have any questions, put them in the Airheads community or below this video. Thanks for watching and till next time.